Okay. By the way, I have a sign-up sheet. So, I have a few things I want to wrap up. Of course, today is the I'll spend today's session on finishing this chapter on fixed exchange rate. And it's actually a very important class today, as we see that things are sort of building up step by step. So I don't know what's going on today, so few people come. Actually, it's a big loss for those who don't come, because things are getting more and more difficult, and today's class is crucial for you to understand a lot of stuff. So I just don't understand why people maybe they're late, or maybe they have a midterm before that, perhaps. That's a possibility. But I'm going to sort of come back to visit several things. I'm gonna come back and let me just, last time I remember I was talking about the balance of payments crisis, right? Balance of payments crisis. So, what caused the balance of payments crisis? Can anybody tell me what is one very important cause of balance of payments crisis? Can anybody tell me? Can anybody tell me what is one very important reason why there's a balance of payments crisis? Can you tell me? Yeah. What do you think is give me one important reason why there's a balance of payments crisis. I'm sorry. So, what is the balance of payments crisis? So, can you tell me what is the balance of payments crisis? Can you tell me what is the balance of payments crisis? What? Falling official foreign reserve. Falling is not a problem. It can be falling, but it falls. You mean it's really falling very fast? That's actually part of it. Yeah, I think you kind of capture one of the important things. Is a balance of payment crisis is that the foreign reserve is depleting, right? And then so what caused it? Okay, so can you tell me what caused it? One reason, why? One big reason why?
Change in expectations.
It's an expectation of the exchange rate. Okay, so the EE changes. Okay, so but what causes the EE to change?
Like a current devaluation or appreciation.
Actually, it's really people's confidence. It's really about confidence. It's really about expectation. Is about people's view. You know, the market's view of what the exchange rate would be in the next period. So it's so then you will ask, well, what caused that pessimism to arise, for example? So typically, the EE will be more than the fixed exchange rate. So originally, the country fixed exchange rate at E0. And then when the fixed exchange rate is credible, then the EE would be actually equal to E0. That is a credible fixed exchange rate. Okay? It's credible. So it's credible that the market believes the fixed exchange rate. Remember, the fixed exchange rate is announced by the government. If the government actually commits, the government actually announces it and say, I'm going to commit to this. So if the market believes you, so it's a credible fixed exchange rate. But suppose the EE changes from E0 to E1 for whatever reason, such that E1 is greater than E0, that means that people become pessimistic about the future exchange rate. So somehow they change the expectation, perhaps because of what? Can anybody tell me why this can happen? Why this can happen? Just give me one reason why this can happen. Well, perhaps the foreign reserve is depleting, is falling. Okay, it's falling because people kind of look at the reserve and see that the reserve. Well, actually, that's why a lot of times in actually almost any country, any central bank, they would not disclose their foreign reserve. Foreign reserve is a state secret. Okay, the amount of foreign reserve is a state secret for almost any country. China, for example, what is the foreign reserve? Nobody knows. People can only estimate it, because if you know that, then you can monitor, the foreign reserve, and then if the foreign reserve is depleting, is falling, that will attract speculators to kind of change the market expectation. The speculators can actually change the market expectation. You see, the speculators themselves are part of the market. Okay, if there's a large speculator, they can of course change the market, but they do not just affect the market by their own money, but they affect the market by convincing the rest of the market to change the expectation. So that once the expectation changes, okay, so we're talking about balance of payments crisis, right? So falling reserve and then change of expectation can be caused by falling reserve because there is some policy that is not sustainable in the country. One possible reason, I can give you one example where the government policy can be perceived as being unsustainable, is that the country keep increasing government spending beyond its means. Okay, so fiscal expansion, but then doesn't have enough revenue to cover the fiscal expansion. So what do? You borrow money, government bonds, right? But these government bonds, if they are actually bought by the central bank actually just buy the government debt from the government. Whenever the government issues the new debt, the central bank just buys it. So it will increase the money supply. Okay, so because that increases domestic asset, the central bank's domestic asset will expand. But under fixed exchange rate, you cannot expand your money supply, so you have to decrease your foreign exchange reserve. You see, so this kind of fiscal lack of fiscal discipline, we call it the lack of fiscal discipline, will cause the depletion of foreign reserve. Do you see that logic here? So so fiscal expansion. One possible reason is fiscal expansion leads to government issues new debt, and if it is bought immediately by the central bank, so as a result, that actually leads to that means that the central bank's domestic assets rise, but actually that has to lead to the foreign assets has to fall because of fixed exchange rate. Because you cannot change your money supply under fixed exchange rate. Your R has to be equal to R star. So your total money supply cannot change. So as a result, your foreign asset falls. Okay, if you keep doing that, this lack of fiscal discipline can lead to that, and the market knows that. If the market knows that, you say, oh, this is falling, and it keeps falling, then the exchange rate will not be sustainable eventually. You see, if we attack, they would not have enough to defend their currency. So we'll do it. So that is one possible way why it triggers, a lack of fiscal discipline triggers speculative attack, okay, and change the expectation. Once the expectation changes, you would have a further problem, you see. So this is a very important diagram here, okay. I've already talked about this, but let me just explain this. So the expectation changes from E0 to E1, so that the green curve shifts to the right. And what the central bank can do is to raise interest rate. We have to sell foreign assets. We have to sell foreign asset. As it sells foreign asset, the money supply will shrink from M1 to M2, and the interest rate will rise. The interest rate has to rise because people expect your currency to depreciate, and so you have to compensate investors for the expected depreciation of your currency. Okay, so you have to increase your interest rate. Your interest rate have to increase because people expect your currency to depreciate. So in order to stop the conversion of your currency into foreign currency, you have to raise your interest rate. Okay, that's the conversion of your currency into foreign currency by domestic citizens is called capital flight. People want to exchange into foreign currency because they think that the exchange rate, is not sustainable. One way to interpret this is you just look at originally if the interest rate is R star, but if the expectation changes to E1, you can see that the green curve shifts to the right at the exchange rate E0. At the exchange rate E0, having a domestic interest rate equal to R star, so having this equal to this at E equal to E0 is not sustainable because the exchange rate expectation has changed to E1. So the foreign, can you see that at E equal to E0, at 0.2 prime, okay, that is where the expected return of foreign currency deposit. The expected return to foreign currency deposit is actually equal to this. Whereas if your interest rate is at R star, people would sell domestic currency and buy foreign currency, right? So it's not, so this and this is not sustainable because foreign currency, the return to foreign currency deposit is higher. Return to foreign currency deposit is higher than return to domestic currency deposit. Can you see that at this level? So either there are two things you can do. At this, because this is greater than that, either you devalue your currency, If you devalue your currency, it's fine. You devalue it to E1. You can devalue it to E1, no problem. Problem solved. Okay? But if you want to defend it at E0, what do you have to do? You have to raise your interest rate to this level. If you want to defend your exchange rate at E0, you have to raise your interest rate to this level. How do you raise it? You have to decrease your money supply. How do you decrease your money supply? Sell foreign asset. Buy domestic asset. Sell foreign currency. Buy domestic currency. That's the same thing. Okay. So why is this return? Can everyone tell me why at this return to foreign currency deposit is greater than domestic currency deposit? So what is the return to foreign currency deposit in this case? Can everyone tell me at E0, if at E equal to E0, if this is true, what is the return to foreign currency deposit? Anybody?
R star.
Huh?
The R star, the foreign currency's interest rate.
No, not R star. What is the return to domestic currency deposit? R star. This is R star. Because I'm saying that you are at R star. Suppose you are at R star. Suppose R is equal to R star. I'm saying that it's not sustainable because this is greater than that. So this, what is this? At E equal to E0. R star plus. Plus what?
E1 minus D0 over E1.
Exactly. This is the thing. So what I'm saying is that maybe you misunderstood my question. So my question is, this is not sustainable because this is greater than that. So there are two ways you can deal with this problem. The central bank can do. One is to devalue the currency to E1, but the other is to defend it, to defend E equal to E0. If you defend it, you have to do something. What do? You just have to sell foreign assets, reduce your money supply, and jack up your interest rate to exactly this level so that uncovered interest parity holds. So people are indifferent between holding domestic currency deposit and foreign currency deposit, and they do. The capital flight will stop. So the capital flight will stop. Either you defend your currency at E equal to E0, but by raising your interest rate, which is the same as selling for an asset. Okay, or you devalue your currency to E1. So there are two possible ways to do it. Like what did Hong Kong do? What did Hong Kong do in the Asian financial crisis? Can anybody tell me? In 1998, well, you're probably too young to remember it, but you might have read about it. So what did Hong Kong do in that case?
Raise the interest rates.
It actually defended, right? Obviously, it defended the exchange rate. In order to defend the exchange rate, it has to raise the interest rate. It has to sell foreign assets. It has to sell a lot of US dollar assets. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority actually has to sell a lot of US dollar asset and buy Hong Kong dollar asset. So basically it's to sell US dollar and buy Hong Kong dollar. Basically, it's actually very intuitive. You buy Hong Kong dollar, you try to prop up your currency, you buy back your currency. You create demand for your currency. When you buy back your currency, you're creating demand for your currency. You prop up the demand for your currency, right? So that's when you buy it back, right? It's very intuitive, actually. So that's what the Hong Kong Monetary Authority did. They defended it. Instead of devaluing it, I tell you what's the risk. Can anybody tell me what's the risk of devaluing the currency? Suppose Hong Kong actually give, yield to a speculative attack at that time and devalue the currency. What do you think? What happened? the thing is, you cannot easily satisfy the speculators. Once you devalue to E1, they will try to make the exchange rate, that they try to change the expectation to E2, which is greater than E1, so they keep speculating, they keep attacking your currency even after you've devalued it. It's very, you enter into a very unstable territory once you decide to devalue. It's very risky. That's why a lot of these countries that adopt fixed exchange rate, if they have enough, if they're confident enough, if they have enough foreign reserve, they will defend it. The problem is that some countries do not have enough foreign reserve. That's the problem. If you don't have enough reserve, then you have to yield to, you have to give in to the speculators, and you have to give up. I mean, countries like Indonesia exactly got into that kind of crisis, and the exchange rate just tumbled 80% because the exchange rate is just 20% of its original value. So it's just a disaster. Yeah.
But what's the basis that these speculators have to start attacking?
Well, you're late, so I've already explained everything here.
Okay.
So I've explained the spaces. Yeah. So lack of fiscal discipline, you know, is one possible reason, and that this, you know, that can lead to the falling foreign asset, and if the market, if speculators have, you know, monitor the trajectory of your foreign reserve holding, they figure that you don't have enough foreign reserve, and then they would start to attack. Yeah.
So like you mentioned, how we have to sell the foreign assets to reduce the money supply, but can the government like sell domestic assets instead? Then that won't cost capital flight. Does that, would it make sense?
So you can say it again?
Because capital flight appears because a country sells its foreign assets, and just to reduce the money supply. But can they instead sell domestic assets?
No. Actually, capital flight occurs because people feel that because in this case, obviously they initially, this is true, right? Before you sell the asset, so you're saying that instead, so you buy.
So you sell domestic.
You sell domestic asset.
Instead of foreign asset.
You sell domestic asset. Now the problem is that when you sell the domestic asset, you're not intervening in the foreign exchange market. You see, the market, if the central bank doesn't take the lead in intervening in the foreign exchange market, then the market actually is already not confident about your exchange rate. If you don't intervene to try to buy back your currency, nobody's going to buy back your currency. You are the only rescue of your own fate. You know, you have to enter the foreign exchange market to buy back your own currency in order to save your currency. Nobody's going to help you. The market is not going to help you because the market has already lost the confidence. You need to. So the tricky part is that there is a foreign exchange market there. There's a foreign exchange market there, and there is uncovered interest parity there. There is an uncovered interest parity here that people would say, you know, when you know, the one thing maybe that what's tricky is that you're saying, okay, suppose you're able to raise you do this by reducing the domestic asset rather than reducing foreign asset. But I can tell you that it does not work as because one thing I did not emphasize enough is that in the foreign exchange market you actually do somebody do need to buy the domestic currency. Somebody do need to, in order to sustain it at the E0 level. In this case, I did not tell you this, but in fact, you have a supply and demand of, of your home currency. You see, supply of, this is the exchange rate. Okay, this is the exchange rate. Okay, your exchange rate. There's a supply. Supply. Okay, it's 1 over exchange rate. Actually, this is the value. So if you're higher than this, the value. If this is higher, that means the E is lower. Yeah. So that's the supply and demand of the home currency of home currency, of domestic currency, and this is the demand for domestic currency. So in the foreign exchange market, in fact, these curves are shifting. And this is 1 over E0, okay? So suppose people lost their confidence. They don't demand the domestic currency. They actually when people are selling your currency, that means that the demand curve shifts to the left. So this thing, this falls, that means that your E actually depreciates, right? The demand shifts to the left because people, just like Apple, right? If you're not interested, well, orange, okay, let me not talk about Apple, otherwise you will feel that it's the phone. I said orange, okay, so if people are not interested in orange, they suddenly lose the interest in orange, the orange price will fall. So what can you do? Well, the orange producer may want to sustain the price of orange by buying back the orange themselves and create this demand, It's just like that. I mean, orange and foreign exchange is similar, right? So if people have lost interest in your good, you create you try to prop up the price of your good by buying it back yourself. You see? But somebody has to do it, okay? The central bank has to do it in this case. Yeah. Right.
But then if you sell domestic assets, wouldn't that shift your supply curve as well? Back up?
Yeah, actually that can no. I'm talking about let me see here. Demand. No. Demand, not the, because you're buying back.
But
you're buying back your currency. How can you increase the supply? You're actually reducing it. You're reducing the supply of it.
yeah, but you were saying selling the domestic assets, why wouldn't it work? I still don't understand why. Because
I'm saying that you have to intervene in the foreign exchange market. The central bank has to intervene in the foreign exchange market if the market itself is not clear what to do. If the market is clear what to do, you can rely on the market, I can tell you. It's a very tricky thing, If the market believes that if the EE, okay, is equal to, if the market believes E is equal to E0, then if other people, okay, put it this way. Okay, let me just try to explain it in a very, very simple way. Maybe I think the most simple way for me to say is that in this market, when people have capital flight, this curve shifts to the left. You all agree? And as a result, if you don't do anything, the exchange rate will depreciate. Do you agree? If nobody do anything, The exchange rate will depreciate. So who will do something? Somebody has to do something. And it's only the central bank would be willing to do it. Because the market, suppose you're some market player, just an individual in the market, you would not be interested in buying the home currency. You would not be interested in buying the home currency. You're not interested at that level, right? So only the central bank can be interested, because you'll be losing money if you're just an individual in the market, because it's like a collapsing. It's like a collapsing currency. You want to buy a collapsing currency? Nobody will buy it. You know, it's already depreciating, and everybody's trying to leave this house, and everybody's trying to sell it. Why would you buy it? The market, people will not buy it, right? Because they believe that the E has already changed. They believe that the E has already changed from E0 to E1. They believe it. The market believes it, but the central bank doesn't. That's why the central bank has to do something. The central bank so it's a tug of war between the central bank and the market. The central bank will insist that EE should be equal to E0, but then the speculator said, no, EE should be equal to E1. So you're doing it's a tug of war, and the central bank will buy the home currency to sort of shift the demand curve back to its original level, so that the exchange rate will be back to that level. So in this case, so you're seeing. Okay, so let me say one thing that maybe you let me just so maybe you're saying that from the okay. Now I think one thing I can explain why. If your central bank reduce the domestic asset instead of reducing the foreign asset, it has to rely on the market to balance, to take care of this uncovered interest parity. The market will arbitrage. You have to rely on the market to arbitrage, right? So your point is that if the central bank sells foreign sells domestic asset, right? So it still will raise the interest rate, and so
like my point is saying that isn't it the same effect as selling foreign assets?
It's a good question. Does anybody have any other opinion?
I think
Yeah?
like theoretically, like it is the same whether you buy whether you like sell foreign asset or domestic asset. But because if you like sell foreign asset, you will directly intervene the foreign exchange
Yes.
market, so the effect will be faster. And if you like sell domestic asset, like you need to wait for the money supply to change, and then like it can affect the interest rate. So it's a much longer process. So I think in our context, because we talk about the exchange rate, so we talk about this like more directly.
The effect would be definitely faster if the central bank directly intervene in the foreign exchange market. That's also my view. My view is definitely that the effect would be faster. It would be the directly intervening, right? Because this is exactly what the central bank wants. It's to defend the currency. If you try to defend the currency, the most direct way to defend it is to enter into the foreign exchange market. That's no other more direct way than that. If you don't do it directly, then I would consider the way that you suggest is to sell the domestic asset instead. The interest rate in fact will also rise, is for sure. The interest rate will also rise. I suppose in this case, it must be that the market, you're relying on the market to buy the domestic currency and sell the foreign currency. But somebody must go to the foreign exchange market to buy domestic currency and sell foreign currency. Somebody must do it. If the central bank doesn't do it, somebody else has to do it. In this case, in your scenario, you're relying on somebody in the market to do it. Because otherwise, it just cannot happen. And if you are a central bank, do you want to do it in a direct way or you want to do it in an indirect way? Well, in an indirect way, first of all, it's not as quick, and secondly, the market has already lost the confidence, and do you want to rely on the market to defend the currency, so to speak? The market itself already doesn't know the direction, what to do, and you cannot even defend it by relying on the market, on people, on the market players, other than yourself. So that's the point, yeah.
I mean, if you really don't have foreign reserves, can you not sell domestic currency to defend your?
Well, the thing is, again, you have to. Somebody has to buy the domestic currency and sell the foreign currency. Somebody, if not the central bank, somebody, some market player has to do it. But in this situation, nobody will come forward. Nobody will come forward because I think, well, yeah, there seems to be a sort of missing link here that I keep trying to convince you, but you're not convinced. So there seems to be some missing link here. it really has to be somebody has to go in the foreign exchange market to do, and assume that nobody will do it. You can think of it as an assumption, which I cannot justify. So that's why you're not convinced. So yeah.
Actually,
But
I
yeah.
have a question. That
Yeah.
In your case, you explained that the central bank will sell foreign asset and
Right.
buy domestic asset.
Yes.
Then for the balance sheet of the central bank, then the asset side will have no change.
No, the asset side will have to shrink.
The domestic asset will increase and foreign asset will decrease.
No, in this case, it has to shrink because the money supply will have to, at least momentarily, at least as long as EE is equal to E1, you have to reduce your balance sheet so that your interest rate has to rise. But under normal condition, I know where your confusion is. Under normal condition, EE is equal to E0. In that case, yeah, you have to maintain your money supply at a, your balance sheet asset side has to be constant. But that is under E equal to E0. But now once the E becomes E1, you have to at least temporarily, you have to shrink your money, your balance sheet. But when this subsides, when the EE goes back to E0, then you can increase your money supply back to the old level.
So do you mean sell more than buy to increase the supply? Because you said you're selling foreign asset, so you decrease the foreign asset part
Yeah.
on the balance sheet, and you buy domestic.
No, I didn't say you buy domestic asset. I didn't say that at all. That he said that. He said you want to reduce the domestic asset. I say don't touch domestic asset.
Okay.
I never mentioned about domestic asset. I never. He alluded to domestic asset. I never said anything about domestic asset. I only talk about foreign asset. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm using you as a scapegoat. But I'm not saying do. I never say anything about domestic asset.
But you said central bank is the only one who are willing to buy domestic asset.
No, he's the only one who's willing to buy the domestic currency. Domestic currency. Domestic currency. Domestic currency asset. Okay, well, okay. That's why it is a little bit confusing. Let's don't call it domestic currency asset. Let's call it currency. But oftentimes, this so-called currency are in the form of some very safe asset. Okay, we use the word currency and government bond interchangeably. Like for example, Hong Kong Monetary Authority holds U.S. dollar. They're not holding U.S. They're not holding all of them in U.S. dollar currency because it doesn't yield any interest rate. So that's why they keep a lot of U.S. Treasury bonds. But it's U.S. dollar asset. So this U.S. dollar asset, we use U.S. dollar asset and U.S. currency interchangeably. In the same way, we also say Hong Kong dollar and Hong Kong dollar asset interchangeably. So, but that is not to be confused. Is not to be confused with domestic asset in this case. Okay. So okay, let me see. Your confusion is that if you buy back so your confusion is if the central bank buys back the domestic currency, it will increase the domestic asset side of the balance sheet, right? Is that's what this is what your problem is. My answer is that's not the way to look at it. You just reduce your foreign asset holding without changing your domestic assets holding. This is what happened. So what in order to defend at the E or E0 level, what the central bank has to do is to sell foreign currency and buy domestic currency. Yeah. So it's holding. It will be. So you're asking where does this domestic currency go? And you say, okay, should it be part of the domestic asset, right? This is your question. Let me see. This is this currency will just. This currency the domestic currency will be just put in a safe and just it's not part of the asset. See, because the domestic currency is the liability of the central bank. It's not even asset. You remember on the right hand side this liability. I think that the confusion comes from the fact that you thought you treat liability as asset. That's why it's the problem. Because the currency is actually liability. The currency is actually the liability of the central bank. So that's why it reduces the asset side and actually reduces the liability side, so that the amount of currency in circulation will be reduced. So the money, if you think of this as cash, this bank note, it was just put in the vault of the central bank, and nothing happens. It's just put it there. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm glad you asked this question. I hope this is clear now. It's a liability. The liability is reduced actually.
But what if they buy domestic, like buy the government bond?
Right. Okay. If they buy, okay, yeah.
If
So
this is currency asset, as you mentioned. Like you said, when you sell foreign asset, you are selling, for example, U.S. bonds.
yeah.
Which is very, very safe.
Let's put it now. Let's try to call this currency. Just call it currency without try not to cause confusion. So the central bank, in this case, sells foreign currency and buy domestic currency. But when you buy domestic currency, it's actually absorbing the cash in the market. It's reducing the liquidity. It's reducing the cash being circulated. So it reduces its liability. So it reduces the asset side and also reduces the liability side. But these are just currency. And that's not the same as the government bonds that it is holding. Those are assets. So there's a distinction between the government bonds that the central bank is holding and the currency printed by the central bank. Okay, put it this way. To make it very simple, like this monetary basis all consists of just some paper, some money that's printed by the central bank. Okay? Is it clearer now, or is it? Yeah, just think of this distinction between currency or the money printed by the central bank. Okay, these currency are just the money printed by the central bank. If it's domestic, domestic currency will be simply just money printed by the central bank. Okay, whereas domestic asset is some real government bonds held by the central bank. Foreign asset is some foreign currency held by the central bank. Maybe that may make things clearer. Right.
So,
Yeah, sure.
Can I just, so with the reducing money supply question just now, what, I just want to clarify, do you mean by the time the reduction of money supply effect kicks in, the currency will have tumbled already? Because it's not.
No, it would not have tumbled. If you do it quickly enough, you just raise the interest rate immediately.
Yeah.
And then you would be able to defend that currency.
Okay.
Yeah. So as long as people, in other words, to describe it in practice, is that as long as people, the capital flight begins, people begin to sell the domestic currency for foreign currency. The central bank, whatever the market, whatever the amount, whatever amount whatever amount of domestic currency being sold to the market, the central bank just mop it up. It just mop it up. Whenever people people discard the domestic, well, whenever they try to sell the domestic currency to the market and get foreign currency, the central bank just absorb the domestic currency and buy and then sell the foreign currency to these people. So it's like it's very funny actually. So I'm the central bank. You guys, you want to sell 1 million unit of domestic currency to the market and buy the US dollar. You know what I do as a central bank? I'll do it. You sell it to me. I'll give it to you. No problem. It's just like that. It just absorb all this shock. So it would not affect the exchange rate as a result. It will not affect the exchange rate. It will not affect the rest of the market. Because the rest of the market there's nothing happen to the rest of the market. It's just you and me. So that's why it doesn't affect the exchange rate. It's just like that. It's exactly just like that. So like you sell 1 million, you sell 1 million, you sell 2 million. Okay, I'm going to buy it, and I give it all the foreign currency. I'll give it to you. It's all the central bank just absorb all these things, absorb the shock. The rest of the market is unaffected, totally unaffected. So the exchange rate is not affected. That's why, because in the rest of the market, the supply and demand is unchanged. You see, it's just like that. Yeah.
So after that, the expected exchange rate will gradually decrease to its initial level, and the government.
If the confidence come back, if the central bank wins, just like in the case of Hong Kong in 1998, Hong Kong won.
So the government will gradually increase its money supply.
Yeah, it will have to reduce, exactly, it has to reduce the interest rate back to our stock, which is to gradually increase. So in this case, it would actually just, sell the domestic currency. It can
foreign.
Yeah, increases foreign reserve again, back to the original levels, as if just like before. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so your concern, I still, the only thing I can say at this point to alleviate your concern is that I make an assumption that if the central bank doesn't intervene in the foreign exchange market in this case, nobody else will. This is my assumption. I can justify it. Actually, I can say, the market is just too timid to do it. Yeah. Once you make that assumption, I think that would be everything is just clear, right? Yeah. Is that clear? Okay, I'm very glad that we go through this because this is really, really very very revealing, right? I also want to talk about something called the risk premium, because in our previous discussion, there is no risk premium, right? But in fact, we actually sidestep that issue, right? We can't just assume it away. We just assume that domestic currency deposit and foreign currency deposit, they don't carry risk, right? But of course, it's not always true. Suppose we just talk about default risk, okay? So maybe, you know, there may be default risk, okay? And so as a result, domestic currency deposit and foreign currency deposit are not perfect substitutes. So you have to actually add a risk premium. You have to add a risk premium there, and so for example, yeah. So let me go to this just briefly. Talk about this risk premium thing. Although I'm yeah. So if this is positive, if this risk premium is positive, that means that the home domestic currency deposit has to provide a higher interest rate compared with this right hand side. Okay. So in addition to taking into account the expected rate of depreciation of your currency, you actually have to pay people more than that. You have to compensate people more for holding the domestic currency deposit more than the foreign interest rate adjusted for the expected rate of depreciation. You have to give them more because there's more risk. Because the market perceives the domestic currency deposit as being more risky compared with the foreign currency deposit. So this rho, if it is a constant, then it's not very interesting. If it's a constant, it doesn't affect. It's not affected by anything. Then you know, then it's not very interesting. But the most interesting situation is when this rho is actually variable, when it is actually affected by some factors. If it's affected by some factors, then it becomes interesting. So, for example, if this rho for some reason becomes larger, then you actually have a problem because then you also have a pressure for the currency to depreciate because people will perceive your let's say if you're on a fixed exchange rate, right? So this term is 0. If your fixed exchange rate to begin with, this term is 0. So, but R star is plus rho, right? But if rho increases, then the right hand side is larger than the left hand side, even at R equal to even at E equal to E0. Then people begin to sell the domestic currency and buy the foreign currency. So in order to defend that exchange rate, again, you have to the central bank has to intervene in the foreign exchange market and buy the domestic currency and sell foreign currency. Yeah.
I was wondering, why is there assumption that the domestic asset is riskier? I mean,
No, this is not an assumption. Well, yeah, I mean it's just for illustration. It's just for illustration. Yeah. It's not necessarily more risky. It can be less risky. It really depends.
So the rho can be
negative. Yeah, rho can be negative. Yeah. But we, as an example, we want to illustrate it with the rho positive, because in this case, the domestic, we use it as an example to illustrate, right? When there's capital flight from the home country, because we want to illustrate that. So when rho increases, there will be capital flight as well. That begin to be when people perceive that there's more risk to the domestic currency deposits. You know, perhaps because the banks are not healthy. You know, the bank may default. You know, may become bankrupt. You know, that kind of thing. So the rho increases. Okay, people's outlook about the economy is not good. So rho increases. That will also cause a capital flight. Yeah. So why do I want to talk about this risk premium? Because it is real. In fact, a risk premium oftentimes exists. Okay, and also if this risk premium is somehow related to is related to, for example, you know, how much of government bond is held by the public rather than held by the central bank. So in the textbook there is a you know, we have this try to justify why sometimes sterilized intervention may be successful. But I don't need you to know this. As I said, I'm going to skip this part. But I'm just telling you that you could, you know, you could sort of build a model to justify why sterilized intervention sometimes can be successful in affecting affecting the exchange rate without affecting the money supply. Because of the existence of this risk premium, and this risk premium can change according to some external environment. And also this risk premium can also change, become larger when the you know, during a balance of payments crisis, which I'm going to very briefly talk about. You know, in the case of Mexico, the risk premium actually, rises. Okay, that actually makes the problem more serious. Makes the problem more serious. Okay. Okay. Let me see. So, but I still want to just make sure you understand the balance of payments crisis. This is very important. Okay. I want to make sure you understand the balance of payments crisis and the capital flight. Okay. I think our discussion today has gone a long way towards you understanding this, and it's very nice because nobody would understand balance of payments crisis without attending my class. So because when you talk to people in the street, they don't know what's balance of payments crisis. They don't know. They just don't know because they have never studied international macro. But you should be proud of yourself because now you have studied international macro. You know what is balance of payments crisis. You know what is capital flight, and you know how it is caused. You know why under this kind of attack, the central bank, the interest rate will have to rise. Okay, and then the foreign reserve will be reduced in the central bank. Okay, and so you know all these kind of things, right? And I mean that's oftentimes because of the change in expectation, right? Oftentimes this is because of the lack of fiscal discipline will cause speculative attack. But sometimes one can argue that it's not due to this kind of balance of payments crisis, may not be due to the lack of fiscal discipline of the government. Maybe just purely due to the speculator just trying to influence the market, change their expectation. They somehow, George Soros has been the scapegoat of this kind of thing. Have you heard of George Soros? He was a very famous currency speculator. He made a lot of money by apparently in some speculative attack on currencies. We talk about billions of US dollars, and he was a scapegoat and has been vilified by many people, including Malaysian Prime Minister. And some people say that this currency speculator, they just try to find any country, that has vulnerability, okay, that has low foreign reserve, and maybe unable to defend that fixed exchange rate. It will just attack the currency. So when he attacked the currency, he tried to manipulate the EE. Okay, he tried to manipulate EE and make people believe that the EE should be larger. Okay, so once you have that, then the currency will have a problem, right? So if you don't have enough reserve, what do? You just devalue. You just have to devalue your currency. If you devalue the currency, and the speculator, if the speculator stops there, that's it. But the speculator, of course, will make money as a result of that, right? But other than that, you just stop there. Okay, so you can see. Suppose this is actually the same diagram, right? So if the speculator just somehow manipulate the EE and say it should be E1, then what you can do instead of reducing your money supply, you can just devalue your currency. Just once you devalue it, your outstyle remains the same. Your out remains the same, but then your equilibrium exchange rate will be somewhere up there. And interestingly, your new equilibrium will be E1. And then you fix it there. You devalue from E0 to E1. That's it. And then you satisfy the speculator. The speculator makes money, and then if he stops there, then nothing else will happen. You just devalue once. Unfortunately, oftentimes it's not just like that, because once you are willing to devalue from E0 to E1, then the speculator may actually manipulate the exchange, the EE again, and try to speculate one more time. And in fact, the market may begin to believe the speculator, and then it becomes a very volatile. The EE becomes very volatile, and that becomes very dangerous for the currency. You see, so this is called self-fulfilling currency crisis, when it is not exactly caused by lack of fiscal discipline, but caused by speculator, trying to. This is self-fulfilling. Why? Precisely because when EE is equal to E1, if the central bank just devalue the currency to E1, then it's a new equilibrium. It's self-fulfilling. You see? It's self-fulfilling, totally self-fulfilling. If the market believes that the EE should be E1, then if the central bank give in to that, to give into that change in expectation, it just becomes E1. So if market believes in E1, then it really becomes E1. That's why it's self-fulfilling. It's just like that. Okay. Let me see. So I have already talked about this kind of self-fulfilling. So the next thing, well, originally I wanted to talk about the all these. I wanted to talk about the Mexico peso crisis, but but a lot of this is actually very self-explanatory after we have talked about all these things in the theory. So this is just a case study. You can just read it yourself, actually. So do I need to go through it? I don't think I need to go through it. It's just something happened in Mexico, you know. So in 1994, you know, there was a, you know, balance of payments crisis. So what happened is that, you know, it's a fixed exchange rate, you know. Originally it was a fixed exchange rate, but because of the something that resembles this kind of lack of fiscal discipline, and the, you know, the market begin to feel that the currency is overvalued, and then the speculative attack and all that kind of thing, right? So it was originally good, everything is good in the early 1990s, but then something adverse happened. Political development caused the risk premium to rise. In this case, when the risk premium rises, it actually, as I said, people begin to have some capital flight because of that, and also the U.S. also increases its interest rate. So that also means that you know, in order to set our star, you have to somehow increase your interest rate. Mexico also has to increase its interest rate. You know, so as a result, you know, the right-hand side is now greater than the left-hand side because our star has increased and rho also has increased. So people begin to sell, investors begin to sell the peso and buy the U.S. dollar, right? So the curve of the peso returned to U.S. dollar deposits shift to the right because it promised to maintain fixed exchange rate, so it has to sell the dollar-denominated assets, decrease the money supply, and increase interest rate. Okay, so so the question is, it needed to have adequate reserve of dollar-denominated asset. The question is, that did it have enough? It just turns out that its foreign reserve just keeps falling. Okay, because of in this case, it's because of the triggered by this increase in U.S. interest rate and the increase in risk premium, and the risk premium increase was due to political development in this case. Because it doesn't have enough reserve, then it has to devalue the currency in order to fight the capital flight, as I just said. In order to fight the capital flight, you have, you know, you don't have reserve to defend your currency, existing currency. You have to devalue it, and by devaluation, you increase your foreign reserve. Okay, by unexpectedly devaluing your currency, you increase your reserve. However, the risk premium increased further because of the exchange rate risk. Because people sort of expect the exchange rate to devalue again. So this risk premium is not just a default premium. It actually has some exchange rate risk that's also built in the risk premium. So this EE rises as people lose the confidence. So you both the rho. So there are three things now. Our star increases, rho increases, and EE also increases. All these things are sort of adding to the pressure, you know, to the currency, right? So that leads to more capital flight, yeah. So the reserve is nearly gone, and you have to abandon the exchange rate. Once you abandon the exchange rate, you cannot even devalue anymore. You don't even call it devaluation. You just abandon it and let it freely float. You let it freely flow, and that's the worst part. When you let it freely flow, you don't know where it flows to. it will just sink to some level. No, anybody's scared, right? So in this case, it's 30%, another 30%. So as a result, IMF coming in and kind of, lend money to Mexico, lend it so that it has, you can lend money so that it has more reserve. You can lend money. The IMF can lend money to a country, to a central bank, so the central bank now would have more foreign reserve, right? And then guarantee the loans and all that. Economy begin to the default risk reduce, and because you already had a low level exchange rate at already exchange value is already at low value, so you that will help you to recover because your export will increase. Okay, export will your current account will improve, and so on. The economy can recover because Mexican is relatively inexpensive because of the depreciation. And then there's increased demand for Mexican products. Also lead to a further, it goes back to the previous level. So basically that's it. That's the one case study. In this case, is a capital flight. In this case, it's caused by rho, increase in rho, but it also caused by the change in EE as well. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So. So two things I want to talk about is the long run effect. Two long run effects which I have not. So you remember I talked about two long run effects. One is the permanent fiscal expansion, and the other is devaluation. Okay. So I did not spend enough time talking about that. Let me just go back to this. Fiscal expansion, right? Remember permanent fiscal expansion. Under a fixed exchange rate, in the short run, of course, it's going to increase output and has no effect on price, no effect on normal exchange rate. But in the long run, as we said, in the long run, price will increase because money supply increases, right? When you have fiscal expansion, under fixed exchange rate, you also need to increase your money supply. So as to keep the fixed exchange rate fixed. But if this is permanent, then you have a money shock, right? So money supply increases. Long run neutrality of money, right, means that the price will have to rise, okay, in the long run. And price has to rise in the long run. So as a result, your real exchange rate will appreciate. Okay, so Q. So your Q, remember, your Q is going to E P star over P. So your in the long run, P rises, so that whole thing will fall. All right? Because E is fixed exchange rate, E, and P star is just foreign price level. So in the long run, you have a appreciation, just like in the case of floating exchange rate. Interestingly. Just like in the case of floating exchange rate, you have your permanent fiscal expansion will lead to an appreciation immediately. But in this case, it's not immediate, it's the long run, in the long run. And also, let me see. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. That's the main thing. It will of course also go back in the long run. Of course, you go back to the full employment level. So I want you to understand this. It's very important to understand that in the long run, the the real exchange rate appreciates just like in the floating exchange rate case. Okay, but what's interesting is that in the floating exchange rate case, the Q falls. The Q falls not because P rises, but because E falls. This is under floating. This is under fixed exchange rate in the long run. This is short run and long run and long run. This is long run. Under fixed exchange rate in the long run, this will fall. This falls because P rises. Under floating exchange rate, both short and long run, there's a currency appreciation, real appreciation, but it's because of the nominal appreciation. So that's the difference. Okay? I want you to really understand this point. Another point I want you to understand, I'm running out of time already, I'm sorry. So, but let me just make sure this, the long run adjustment after a devaluation, okay? A devaluation, as you said, as you know, devaluation is an increase in money supply, right? You will increase your money supply because you actually increase your foreign asset, your foreign reserve. So that's when money supply increases, balance sheet increases. And as a result, again, in the long run, the price must rise because money supply increase, right? And as a result, your E actually, of course, also rises because from E0 to E1, right? You devalue the currency. So as a result, the money supply increase, which is important, is that the money supply increases. So a devaluation, of course, it's permanent, right? Once you talk about devaluation, it's permanent. You have E increases, of course, right? But also MS increases, right? Because your foreign reserve increased, and your P also increased in the long run, okay? Long run, okay? And all these will increase proportionally. They will increase proportionally. X%, 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 all of them just same percentage. Okay? That's all I want to say. That's it. Any question? So this is a very interesting chapter. So I hope you can learn it. I don't know whether I have time. Well, I think I still will have to go through the rest of the chapter next time. The rest of the chapter is about the exchange rate system, the international monetary system. I will still go through that. I'll still go through the rest of the chapter, but next time. And also, but next time I'll begin chapter 8 after I finish the rest of chapter 7. So please read chapter 8 as well. Okay, so here is the sign-up sheet, please.